Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I am the chair of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, and this is our regularly scheduled meeting. I am joined today by council members Warsami, Fry, and Kano, and we are a quorum of the committee. We have 3 items on the agenda for today. They're all listed as discussion items, and we will just take them one by one. The first is an update to our 2016 legislative policy positions. This was an item that we saw last cycle as well. It's essentially a cleanup of what is our very long list of adopted policy positions that has been that grows and changes every year as we go through this process. Ms. Bergman is here to give us the overview on where we're at with this document, and then we hope to adopt this so we have kind of a cleaner slate to work from as we then review new proposals.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Council members. Sasha Bergman with the IGR Department. Before you, as the Chair said, is a document that we've discussed in this committee in the last cycle and then in, I think, previous cycles with updates on how the process was going. This is just a broad update of all of the policy positions that have been in our policy document for a number of years. And I wanted to thank the committee members for your help and input on this. Also, thank our urban scholar from the summer, Guled Ibrahim, who I did invite here to be here today, but he was unable to be here. He would have liked to be here if he was able. And then my colleagues in IGR, and then of course the staff throughout the enterprise that worked really hard on this update, numerous conversations, follow-up emails. I think all of the staff in the room who are going to be presenting on the next item helped a lot with this update, and just want to give a big thank you to them. Just to make sure that we're clear on what all the different documents are on this item, we have the marked up document that's sort of messy and describes all of the changes that we'll be presenting today or hopefully adopting today. And then there's a cleaned up document where the positions are actually assumed to be adopted so that you can see what it would look like if adopted. That's been posted and was sent to all of you within the last week. But just today, we do have an updated version with two minor changes, and that is now posted online as an updated version. And the difference is, you can tell on the front cover, the front page would say draft 10/27/16 to indicate this is the document that is the most up to date. And then the 2 changes that we made are on page 4 related to the advancing equity statement. I think after some conversation and revisiting, the initial statement that we had drafted for this section kind of listed a number of different issue areas that we want to advance equity in. And instead of accidentally omitting something that we would want in that space, we brought in the statement a little further just to speak to the city's goal to advance equity in sort of a holistic way. If there are any questions, happy to answer those. Otherwise, the second update is on page 11. Under the general city livability section, we did get some additional input from council members and thought we would recommend to delete the position opposing alcohol in grocery stores or wine in grocery stores. This is a bill that had been discussed many years ago at the legislature, but we haven't seen any action on it in some time and don't think that it will be coming up again anytime in the future. So we would recommend deleting it. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the updates, if there are any.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Bergman. To get us going, I'm going to go ahead and move approval of this updated document. I appreciate that you offered some thanks to kind of a wide variety of staff who worked on this document, including yourself, of course, and our intern from the summer and all of the team on IGR, as well as department staff. I know this is sort of the not so fun work, but important work to make sure that we really are carefully reviewing what has sometimes collected over time and make sure that we clean that up, freshen it, and make sure it accurately reflects where the city of Minneapolis is today with our policy positions. So I'm not seeing any questions from council members. So with that, let's go ahead and vote on the motion to approve. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And we now have an updated policy positions document. Thank you, Ms. Bergman.
Thank you.
Now we have our item number 2, which is every year we go through a significant process to evaluate ideas on legislative proposals that may come from policymakers, but many of which come from staff who are working in certain subject areas and are able to see that interplay with the city's need to take a position on state policy ideas. And this is our day to hear more in depth about our new proposals. Ms. Bergman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the document that was posted online is sort of a grid with the 7 proposals that we'll be hearing about today that have been brought forth by departments, and then we'll be working off of a long PowerPoint presentation that encompasses all of the department PowerPoints on these positions. I did want to thank the policy liaison team who put in a lot of work over the summer and fall generating some of these ideas, meeting to discuss them and vet them, and the policy liaison team actually heard more than a dozen proposals this round, and as you can see, there's only 7 being presented today. Just want to speak a little bit to the ones that didn't move forward. Some of them were, once they brought them forward to colleagues and they got input from other staff and other departments, they realized that there might be another way to approach the issue that doesn't require legislative action, or kind of hearing the thoughts and reactions of their colleagues. And in my mind, that's exactly how this process is designed to work, to have folks bring their different ideas forward and hear from colleagues and get different perspectives, and maybe even strengthen the approach that they're planning to take to resolve an issue. So big thanks to all of them. And then some of them are other issues that we're going to continue to have discussions with staff and with policymakers to get more information and see how we might move forward on the ones that are not moving forward just yet. So today, I guess quick overview of what we're going to hear about is two proposals from the city attorney's office on state surcharges and criminal contempt proposal. We'll hear from Licenses and Consumer Services and CPED about a 2018 Super Bowl license sales extended hours. And these 3 proposals are really ones that we anticipate, if they're approved and we work on them at the legislature, that the city would really be one of the leading voices on them. And then the 4 remaining proposals that we'll be hearing about today are from the Health Department regarding youth tobacco prevention, 2 from Public Works regarding an environmental resources issue, and then organized collection issue. And then I will be stepping in for the Fire Department today, who unfortunately couldn't be here to talk about their proposal regarding military leave reimbursement. And these proposals, we really expect the city, if adopted, would be supportive of them at the Capitol and would help where it makes sense and where it's strategic, but that we would not be the leader on these proposals, and there are other entities that are leading them at the Capitol. And with that, unless there are questions, I'm happy to turn it over to the city attorney's office to get started on their presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Bergman. Ms. Siegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a couple of proposals we're going to talk through real quickly. The first deals with the criminal state court surcharge. And between 2003 and 2009, this surcharge increased from $35 up to $75. And it applies to every criminal defendant convicted of any crime or petty misdemeanor. So any traffic ticket you get, there's a $75 surcharge added on now. And as part of our ongoing work around fines, fees, and driving-related offenses, this seemed like something that fits well with the city's general legislative agenda and the city's goals. So for example, the example here is a $20 jaywalking ticket, $75 court charge, so you owe $95. $50 speeding ticket is a typical speeding ticket, plus $75 for the surcharge. and it's $125. Uh, if you are too poor to pay it, if you're indigent, the courts have the right to set up a payment plan, but they have no legal authority. And the Hennepin County Chief Judge of the Hennepin County District Court has said as much, and the presiding criminal judge, to waive it under the law. So what some judges do is they can deem it uncollectible, so it doesn't get sent to collections. But it still gets sent on to the Department of Motor Vehicles. So eventually, if you don't pay your traffic tickets, your driver's license will be suspended, which then leads to a whole nother cascade of fines, fees, and additional surcharges. This has obviously a disproportionate impact on people of low income, and also, since there are more people of color who tend to be of low income, a disproportionate impact on people of color in our community. So our proposal is fairly simple. It's to amend the state law to grant courts the discretion to reduce or waive the surcharge. And the surcharge, initially, I think it was proposed, Melissa, as a way to help fund the courts under Governor Polani, but it's money that largely just goes into the general fund now. So that's our first, and I'm going to ask Mary Ellen Hang, my criminal deputy, to discuss the second proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Siegel. Ms. Hang.
So our second proposal is around our geographic restrictions. As part of criminal sentences, especially on our repeat offenders, we had been using geographic restrictions, or geomaps as we call them, as a condition of their probation. We sought this only for offenders that repeatedly committed crimes in a certain specific area. The courts have discretion to make this part of their sentence, but what it would do is it would prohibit that offender from being in that specific geographic area. And we found that it actually helped some of our offenders because it kept them out of the areas where they were getting into trouble and away from people that were bad influences, and it had a positive effect on a lot of the neighborhoods. This is just an example of one of our geographic restriction maps that we have in the 3rd precinct. You can see it's just a small area in the 3rd precinct around Franklin Avenue. And so that's just to show you what one looks like. In 2014 and 2015, there was a court decision out of the Court of Appeals and then affirmed by the Minnesota Supreme Court that basically held that prosecutors do not have the authority to impose a separate criminal contempt charge for a violation of the geographic restrictions. The way we had used them is if a person was given a geomap, they would sign it, it would be a court order, and they would be told to stay out of that area. If they go into the area and are caught, they were told this would be a contempt of court charge and a separate criminal offense. It was a very effective tool for enforcing those violations and ensuring compliance. The Minnesota Supreme Court basically held that the criminal contempt statute does not allow for that separate charge. It's not a specific delineated exception to criminal contempt, and therefore we had to stop prosecuting for that separate charge. We still do use the maps, but unfortunately with this recent court decision, they're a lot less effective because it's much, much harder to enforce them as a regular probation violation. And so they've virtually become somewhat ineffective. So our proposal is to amend that specific criminal contempt statute to allow us to continue to charge a separate criminal contempt charge for a willful violation of the geographic restriction map.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Hang. Mr. Wilson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Grant Wilson with the Business Licensing Department, and the proposal I'm presenting today is a extension of liquor hours statute for the 2018 Super Bowl, which will be held in Minneapolis on February 4th of 2018. This has been done for a couple recent events in Minneapolis in the past. The Major League Baseball All-Star Game in July of 2014, we extended the bar hours till 4 a.m. And the Republican National Convention in 2008. We proposed that all on-sale liquor, wine, and beer license holders would be eligible. We've set the draft proposal up for Hennepin County and Ramsey counties. That could be extended to the 7-county metro area if so chosen. If this statute is approved, there's still local approvals required by the Minneapolis City Council. And the proposed time frame is the Friday, Saturday, Sunday of the Super Bowl weekend. The statute itself is worded similar to the past two that we've done. And again, this is a draft. We can modify the days, and we can also, once this is approved, the city council can customize geographic restrictions. In the first case for the Republican National Convention, we restricted it to downtown only. We could do that. We could restrict it by zoning districts, et cetera. But this statute must go in the 2017 legislative session because the 2018 session will be too late for it. And that's the end of my presentation, and be happy to answer any questions.
I'm not seeing any questions. I think we've seen this type of special license many times before, so thank you for that presentation. Ms. Bowler.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Patty Bowler with the Minneapolis Health Department, and my proposal is to really strengthen the youth tobacco prevention and control part of our legislative agenda or our policy platforms. And what I'm going to briefly talk about are support items. The tobacco prevention items are included in the Minnesotans for a Smoke-Free Generations legislative platform. And you can see the organizations that are part of this coalition. It's a 40-member coalition really working on decreasing tobacco use in the state. Just a couple of points about youth tobacco use and its impact. About 85% of smokers start smoking when they're 18 years old, and the group that is probably the group that has the largest increase in smoking are 18 to 24-year-olds. Even though cigarette smoking is at a all-time low in Minnesota, there are large disparities. So youth tobacco use is really a health equity issue. 59% of American Indians use commercial tobacco. About 30% of the LGBTQ communities in Minnesota are current smokers. Another point is that flavored tobacco products are increasingly popular, including menthol. Just a couple, again, kind of a health equity point here is that African American smokers smoke menthol cigarettes more than any other population. And also menthol cigarette use is on the rise with high school smokers. And then lastly, tobacco use costs the state a lot of money. So it's about $2.5 billion in excess healthcare expenses, which represents about $550 per person. So the 4 pieces to this proposal, the first one is to raise the price of the age of purchase to age 21. And as I mentioned, this would really impact youth smoking in that 22% of the smokers in the state are the 18 to 24-year-olds. That's the highest smoking rate of any age group. A number of cities and counties and states actually have passed this policy: Hawaii, California, and about 195 cities and counties. And we've seen, there's been some studies in Massachusetts about the impact, the public health impact, and we've seen youth initiation rates drop and also smoking rates drop overall. The next one is to restrict the sale of flavored products, especially menthol. And again, this is a health equity issue in that the use of menthol cigarettes is substantially higher compared to white populations among communities of color and adolescent African American and adolescent Latino smokers. This policy would also take many cigarettes out of gas stations and corner stores. The next two proposals also relate to youth tobacco prevention. We'd like to see tobacco prices maintained or increased. There's a high price sensitivity to the purchase of tobaccos and tobacco, and many different kind of sources make up the tobacco price, including excise taxes and sales taxes and the tobacco-free fee. We'd all like to see these sources of funding stay high. And then lastly, we would like to see an increase in funding for comprehensive tobacco control programs. So we do spend money in the state of Minnesota for tobacco control, but it's at about 40% of what the CDC would recommend. And we do know that the tobacco industry spends about $156.3 million on tobacco advertising and marketing, and the state spends about $21 million. So there's a big a disparity there. So those are my proposals. I'd stand for questions.
Not seeing questions. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Katrina Kessler. I'm the Director of the Surface Water and Sewers Division in Public Works, and happy to be here to talk about this issue, which really at its core is a way to balance public safety and environmental health. So what are we proposing? The issue really is that salt applied to promote public safety, traveling public safety, whether you're on the sidewalk or your bike or in the road or on the bridges, ultimately ends up in our lakes, creeks, and the river when the snow melts and goes down the drain. It only takes 1 teaspoon of salt to contaminate 5 gallons of water above a level by which fish and aquatic life are not safe. And the salt also impacts our infrastructure. The EPA estimates that for every $50 of road salt that is applied, you have $750 worth of damage to infrastructure from corrosion, including cars, and that annually across the nation, we have $4 billion to $7 billion in damage because of road salt. So what is the city's role? Because this is clearly an issue that spans beyond the city's jurisdiction. Well, the city, together with the park board, has a storm sewer permit that requires us to track and report how much chloride we're using to protect the traveling public. We are also beholden to a total maximum daily load, or essentially a restoration plan, a salt diet that the rest of the metro area is also required to implement, that requires us to think about ways to reduce salt use. I would also argue that this proposal lines up well with the city's goals of maximizing health and safety and vitality. And in June, when we had a discussion about the city results measure for healthy lakes, rivers, and streams, there was a wide discussion at the staff level, the leadership level, the elected officials, and as well as the stakeholders asking for the city to do more on this issue. So partly in response to that meeting, and partly in response to the fact that we recognize that we have responsibilities under our Clean Water Act stormwater permit, we are advocating for state funding for research on new technologies and alternatives to chloride-containing de-icing chemicals, and for sustained funding to promote road salt application training for both public and private applicators. Currently, the city applicators and all of our city contractors are required to attend certification training, but there's no incentive or requirement for private applicators or commercial applicators that aren't working for municipalities to attend the training, which is currently free, but there is no plan to hold it long-term because there isn't funding at the state level to continue that. So this would help with that, as well as asking for additional research to think about ways that we can minimize use of chlorides or alternative pavement methods to think about minimizing impacts to water quality. So we have partners both in our local watershed groups, our neighborhood associations, as well as at the state level. Governor Mark Dayton has declared this the year of water and is calling for action not only on chloride but other pollutants. And although the state has not yet released their policy positions, I expect that there will be something that is led at the state level on this issue. That's all I have, and unless you have questions, I'll turn it over to my colleague.
No, you answered the question I had, which was who do we think will be the lead on this? So, all right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. My name is Dave Herber-Holson. I'm the Director of Solid Waste and Recycling for the city. I'm here to talk a little bit about organized collection. Talk a little bit about the issue and our role. So we are an organized collection city, and we have been since 1971. And for the past 10 years, the last 2 5-year cycles, we've actually put out RFPs and gone through the organized collection process to maintain the organized collection system that we have. And why do we do it? We do it similar to what other cities that have similar interests that we have, and that's to provide cost-efficient and effective services for our residents. Reason I'm here is because this past legislative cycle, there was a bill introduced in the House that looked to place a moratorium for 5 years on the authority of local governments to organize solid waste collection. That would have amended Minnesota Statute 115A. So we're here primarily to oppose that and support our method of organized collection. So what are we proposing? To support local control, to establish or modify organized waste collection services. Other interested stakeholders similar to us would be other cities who are interested in either having already established organized collection or are going to pursue it in the future. And then industry groups that are looking for lower cost, less emissions, more safety. And then other interested stakeholders include the state, the MPCA, which we work with, and the Solid Waste Management Coordinating Board. I guess a little bit of why we support organized collection is typically we keep our expenses down. We have less trucks out there. It's safer, less road wear, less emissions. And I think as opposed to open collection where you have your choice, we've got the consistency in cost and level of service that we provide amongst the city here, where it's not really the case in open collection. So with that, that's my proposal, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. One question I had was just, you may not, I don't know if you know this, it might be our staff, on whether the League of Minnesota Cities took a position on this, and I couldn't remember if they did. Looks like they probably did, which is helpful. I know they have another position on local control issues, which is kind of the backbone of this. But, and then, so this is really just allowing us to get involved should we need to kind of play some defense, in other words. And I will say, over the years, there's been some, in my mind, unusual proposals around organized collection. It's amazing because our residents, of course, love organized collection. It's one of our top-rated services. I'm be curious to know for cities who don't have organized collection how their garbage service ends up being rated. Probably not evaluated since it's not a city service, but I'll have a guess. So anyway, thank you very much. I agree this is a really important issue.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Sasha Bergman with the IGR Department. And just to follow up on that last, the question about the League of Minnesota Cities, when we went through the policy committee process at the League this past summer, I did look at that policy to see if it seemed like it would support this, a position consistent with this in reaction to that bill. They did testify against the bill last year, and so I think we were covered in that regard. The last, I don't look much like Assistant Chief Tyner. I'm a little shorter than he is, but I'll try to do him justice today and present his proposal about military leave reimbursement for public safety employees. Minnesota Statute 192.26 Subdivision 1 requires local governments to pay pay any employees 15 days of compensation per year for military leave. And in addition to those costs, additional costs related to overtime can also occur to fill those temporary vacancies, especially in positions like public safety where they really aren't, they're not able to absorb those vacancies. They really do need to continue to provide for the health, safety, and well-being of residents while supporting their personnel that are also members of the military. So the proposal from the fire department, which the police department would also be supportive of, is to support state funding, including reimbursement of costs incurred related to compensation for leave and overtime costs for public safety employees. This is something that has been around at the legislature the last two biennium. Last biennium, it was introduced by Representative Greg Davids, Republican from southeastern Minnesota, and Senator Sandy Pappas from St. Paul. And it was really led by, I believe, the Minnesota Professional Firefighters Association. So we would not be taking a leading role on this if it is adopted, but would be supportive of it. And I know that there are other cities that have expressed support of this policy or this proposal through letters in the past legislative sessions. And then this, the League of Minnesota Cities is considering adoption of a policy that would support this as well by the board, as you know, Madam Chair, later on this fall. If there are any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them or get back to you if I don't know the answer specifically.
Thank you very much. I am not seeing questions on this.
Okay. Then just really quick, Madam Chair, wanted to talk about next steps. I think our anticipated next steps would be to take the document that you adopted in the last motion, adopting the changes to the 2016 policy positions and adopting a new version of that. It would not be new, it would be that version plus any additional new policies for 2017. So that would be the 2017 policy position adoption, hopefully at the November IGR committee meeting. And then in December, the IGR committee meeting, I can't recall the date offhand, we would hope to adopt the 2017 legislative agenda, which would be our much more focused list for the session, which we will have a better sense on kind of what happens with the election, what the November forecast reveals, and things of that nature as we look to adopt that.
All right. Well, thank you to all of the presenters. I know there's a few of you that are still here, so we really appreciate. Lack of questions doesn't mean that we're not interested. It means we feel like we're very well briefed, and I think maybe you're happy to hear there aren't any questions about why is that in front of us. So I think we feel well prepared. With that, I'm going to move to receive and file the presentation. So all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And we have one last item. This is usually a placeholder item for us on federal, state, and local updates. Is there any update we need to hear today, Mr. Ranieri?
Madam Chair, other than the fact that the next time we meet on November 10th, we will have a report, particularly on the legislature and its makeup.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, I believe we have concluded with our business and we are adjourned. Thank you. It's all right.